Hey guys, Taco Mage here, bringing you a spotlight on Mekanism version 9. Before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to thank Mr. Aiden C. Brady for allowing me to bring this spotlight to you. He's let me work a lot on the spotlight ahead of time, and he's giving me first crack here. So I want to extend a special thanks to him. I also want to mention that once again, like my first Mekanism spotlight, I will be putting time-linked stamps down in the description. So if there's anything that you want to hit without having to do everything else, go ahead and check them out down there and it will take you right to where you need to go. So let's get started here. So you'll notice that I'm actually in my Mekanism version 8 spotlight area. This is where all the magic happened in 3 out of 4 of my first ones. I did actually a reactor one not in this spot. And the reason I wanted to start here is just to kind of look around and mention that textures have changed. Mekanism version 9, the entire texture set has been overhauled. So the entire mod looks different, and you'll notice that it's using the Unity texture set. So very, very nice. Especially if you like that kind of futuristic grunge look, this is going to fit in very nicely with that, like Ender IO, as well as RF tools. So yeah, I just want to take a moment to mention that. And then now we're just going to head right on over to the Mekanism version 9 area, which is right through this portal. If I can get in it. So, welcome to my Mekanism version 9 testbed. As you can see, there's a lot of room to expand here. I will definitely be doing follow-up spotlights on several of the things you'll be seeing today. But for now, we're just going to be hitting things kind of fast and loose, give you the basics to get into the new mod, and then kind of cut you loose without going too much in depth on anything. So to start with the new features, we're going to start with the electric pump, which is a change to an existing block. And the thing that's new with the electric pump, if we turn it on here, is that it now works without consuming the source block. And this is 100% configurable in the config file, but I really like this change personally because water is infinite. So this is just pretty much owning up to the fact that you don't need to consume a water block in order to make water. It's just, nice that way. And so if we go into here, we'll also see that I've got some upgrades. And you guessed it, you can now upgrade electric pumps. And that's tremendous because that's one of the things that I've always wanted to do, make pumps work faster. And now you can, up to 9 times as fast with the same kind of efficiency to speed ratio that you get with any other machine. So that is tremendous. They actually, at full upgrade, produce a lot of water. Roughly about 500 millibuckets per tick. So if you've got a big old bank of these pumps going, you're going to make a lot of water very, very quickly. So very excited about these new changes. Probably my favorite change in the entire pack, if I'm honest. I really like the new pumps. They are tremendous. All right, the next thing on the agenda is new tiered storage. The nice thing about this is options. Do we really need new tiered storage? Yes, we do. It's just nice having storage options. And basically the tiers now match everything that's part of the conduit system, such as the item conduits, which are the logistical pipe, and like the liquids and the gas conduits. Basically, we've got the 4 types. The basic, we've got the advanced, the elite, and the ultimate, each being a step up from the one before it. I won't go into exact capacity details, but just know that we've got a lot more options for storage now, which is always nice. The other thing that's pretty new that's kind of exciting is that there are new security options for all the blocks. So if we go into a block here, we'll see that you've got this little security thing. You can toggle it to private, which means that only you can use it. You can also toggle it to trusted, which will let anybody who's on your trusted list use this block. And that's both use and break the block. So if it's set to private, only I can break this block. If it's set to trusted, only myself or anybody I trust can break this block. And that's the same with opening the GUI. If somebody tries to open a block where they're not trusted or it's not public, they'll just get a message saying that they're not allowed to do it. And that also is the change to the way the personal chests, what used to be the electric chest, it now works on the security system. So how does this work? If we go into the security desk, you'll find that there are a bunch of stuff going on here. And this is actually kind of neat in the way that it works. So if you grab this block out of here. Now there are a couple of ways to set security and ownership and stuff. What you can do is if you want to add a player, let's say my compatriot Toasty, I can just go ahead and add him to my trusted players list. And so any other block that I now set to trusted now will pull from this list. The other thing that I can do is if I go to the security override here and I turn it to on, that'll do is it'll take this security mode here and automatically push it to any block that I own. So as you can see, these are now set to private, and they even mention, I kind of did it quickly here, but you can see that it's overridden. And that's all thanks to this block here. And I can again set it to trusted, and it'll set these blocks to trusted as well. That's really, really nice for doing security. The other thing that's really neat is that if you want to just set one block, like say I've got this enhanced enriching factory, let's turn override off here just so you can see this. Again, this is set to trusted. This is set to public. It knows what the settings are if you go back to override off, which is nice. So let's take this enriching factory here. If I drop it in this little lock area here, if we go to shift over here, you can see that it set me as the owner and set the security to trusted. That's what this block does. Any mechanism block machine that you set in here will turn it to the settings that are set in here. If I set it in this area, it sets it back to a no owner block and back to public. So that's a way to quickly set machines to whatever the security settings are in here without having to go to a full override. So that's actually really, really nice because sometimes you want privacy, sometimes you don't. And you don't necessarily need to go into the GUI to set those things. You can just do it here. Just dump that back in there. So what else is new in Mekanism version 9? Well, we now have muffler upgrades. Yes. This is something that I think everybody has been asking for at least 2 versions. And the way this works, we'll just put something into the sawmill, which is one of the loudest machines that you can get in Mekanism, although I have noticed that the sawmill isn't nearly as irritating as it used to be. If we put something in there and we stand right on this block where we can hear it, if we put the muffler upgrades in here, every muffler upgrade that goes through will cut the sound by 25% until, with the last one, it will make no sound at all. So that's pretty huge for people who want to just, mute the odd block without having to go into the config file and start messing with things. So the other thing I wanted to mention while I'm over here is that there's been a couple of GUI improvements. The most pronounced of which is that there's a new little area down here for heat. This is this red dot area. That's for the heat system, which I'll be showing later on in the spotlight. The other cool thing about the mod that's changed is that you can now, if you click this box down here that's for the energy, you can now switch what units you're using on the fly. So as you can see, RF, EU, Minecraft joules, Mekanism joules, and then back to RF again. You can do that just by left-clicking this box. And you can do that also for the heat stuff, which we'll do a little bit later. So that is a tremendous improvement. No more doing config files. You don't have to enter commands at the prompt. No, you can do it within the GUI now. Next up is the new infusing factories. Not a lot to say here. It's just that, our old friend the metallurgic infuser now has a factory, something that we've all been asking for. So it's, your basic factory concept. You fill it up with redstone, put your metal in here, hit your auto sort. Now you're doing 7 infusion jobs all at the same time. Perfect for when you're trying to do large batches of alloy and don't want to have to do funny things with trying to automate just a single infusion factory. But it's one of those nice quality of life upgrades that I think everybody is just going to be happy to see. Next up on the list, we've got Flamethrower Modes. The Flamethrower, which was introduced in Mekanism version 8, now has a couple of new modes associated with it. And you can toggle modes just like you do with the configurator, which is holding shift and then pressing whatever key that you would use to change the mode. I think by default it's M. So if we throw a pig down here, we can see that the flamethrower burns and kills the pig. That's your basic mode, which is combat mode. If we change it here, the next one is set to heat, and this is actually pretty cool. What heat does is it automatically smelts whatever you shoot with it. So as you can see, I turned wood into coal, or charcoal, and I turned iron ore into iron ingots. That's pretty neat. And of course, if you want to just go with the default mode, you can just change it on to Inferno and have yourself some fun burning stuff. So yeah, that's the changes to the Mekanism Flamethrower. It's a pretty small thing, but it's very nice because it makes the flamethrower usable in a way that isn't nearly quite so world-ending, like lighting forests on fire and stuff. You can just turn it to combat, it doesn't light anything on fire, and you could just hurt the mobs. Or if you want to do some mining with it and just want ingots on the fly, well, just turn it on to heat mode and away you go. You could also turn that tree farm right into charcoal if you wanted. Next up on the list is something that's really, really neat. it was one of those things that I didn't actually expect at all. I didn't even know that it was a thing. And that is all of the conduits, pipes, whatever you want to call them, are now fully upgradable in place. So if I take this alloy and just right-click it, it upgrades it to advanced. You can do that at any of them, all 5 of pipes. There's a new pipe in Mekanism version 9 called the basic thermodynamic conductor, or thermodynamic conductor for the whole line, and that's upgradable as well. And you can go through the full gambit of upgrades, all 4 of them, all the way to ultimate. And you don't have to pick up a single cable, which for me, this is pretty huge because I have the bad habit of designing my entire base with, basic cable just to start, and then I have to go back and pull everything down and re-upgrade it. Now I don't even have to bother. I can just go back, upgrade it in place. Now there is a couple of things to mention here. Each alloy, be it enriched, reinforced, or atomic, can upgrade up to 8 cables that have been put in place. If there are less in place, like what we have in here, it'll only upgrade the ones that are there, and it will still consume your alloy. So if you've got less than 8 cables in your run, you probably want to pull them up and upgrade them the old way, otherwise you're going to be wasting alloy. But then again, if you've got tons and tons of resources, maybe you don't mind if you waste an alloy or 2. Another cool new feature is that the gas burning generator has been improved, and this is actually pretty huge for people like me who really like the gas burning generator's ethylene chain for power. Well, this has made it a whole lot better, and by that I mean a whole lot more compact. Because if we put this in place here, we'll see that it starts producing power like you would expect it to. It's burning ethylene away, and now there's this little burn rate area down here. What that does is that telling you how fast it's actually burning through the gas that you're feeding it. As you can see, we've just got a bunch of ethylene here that's feeding right on in. Now, if we upgrade this universal cable here, let's say with an enriched alloy, to our advanced universal cable, notice our burn rate's actually gone up. That's because it's burning gas a lot faster in order to maximize the amount of output that we've got. Now, there is a limit to that. If I use this and turn it to an elite universal cable, you'll see that it turns to 28. That's actually as fast as it's going to burn. And with that, you're burning 7,800 RF per tick, closer to 7,900. But that's just huge, because that means you're going to be putting down a whole lot less gas-burning generators. I know that prior to this, you needed, I think, something like 40 of them in order to match a fully upgraded crusher. Now you're going to need a lot less of them. And now we're into the first new thing, which is heat mechanics. I mean, before now, the things have been new, but they've been upgrades or tweaks to existing stuff, or, expansion on existing things. And now we're getting into the actual new stuff. And that is going to start with these heat mechanics. So let's go in here. We're going to grab some coal and a lava bucket and a resistive heater. Now, the heat mechanics, the way it works is that you now have 2 blocks that can create heat. Technically, you've got 3, and we'll talk about that in a second. The most basic kind of entry-level block is this fuel wood heater, and it's pretty much as you'd expect. You put fuel in there, it burns it, it creates heat. Pretty simple. The other block that you can use is called the resistive heater, and this one is you pump in RF to it, and the temperature goes up. Now, the important thing here is that you can control how much RF you're pumping into this thing in this GUI here. So if I wanted to put 5,000 in, I could do that. Or if I wanted to put 1,000,000 in, I could do that too. Oh yeah, and they sound kind of heinous, and unfortunately these things don't take any upgrades, so you're probably not ever going to want to put that much in. So you're probably better sticking at like 5,000 where it's nice and quiet. So, what can you do with heat? Well, at the very basic level, and this you'll never want to do this, you could use that to run a heat generator. As you can see down here, we're producing a very small amount of energy on the heat that's being dissipated by this heat generator. You're never ever going to want to do this because it's not very gainful. There's no real reason to ever do this. But, I mean, it is possible. The other thing that's of interest is that you can actually generate heat with a heat generator. It is not very good at it, so I wouldn't recommend it. What happens with a heat generator is that you can create enough heat to not boil water, which isn't that helpful. An important thing to note is that if you just put lava on top of these heaters, let's see if I can put lava on top of these heaters, they don't heat up. As you can see, these are both still at room temperature. The only thing that heats up when you put lava next to it is the heat generator. And again, it doesn't produce very much heat. So the only way to actually heat up these blocks is to use fuel, or in this case, energy. Now, I did say that the heat generator produces heat, not very much. Well, here's basically that in action. As you can see, we're producing very, 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 very little heat. It's also producing energy while it's happening, as you would expect. But if we go down here, we can see we've raised a whole 9 degrees above room temperature. So, as I said, you can use a heat generator to make heat, and the heat comes out the bottom. It just does not produce hardly any heat at all. Not really enough to be worth mentioning. But that's the basics of heat mechanics. So what can you do with heat? Well, the very first thing you can do is you can actually now heat a solar evaporation tower. And actually, they're no longer called solar evaporation towers. They bear a new name called the thermal evaporation tower. And if we go in here, the GUI has not changed at all, but in this case, we have some water being pumped in here. And based on just slightly being above room temperature, we're actually getting a little tiny bit of production. So that's kind of neat right there. That even if you just build one of these things, just have a monolithic thermal evaporation tower, nothing heating it at all, it's still going to produce a little bit based on what biome you're in. But if we go ahead and grab some cable out of here and hook this guy up, we've got a resistive heater on here that's just got 10,000 RF per tick going into it. We can go ahead and hook that up to a port. Again, you're going to need a valve, which is basically your port for the thermal evaporation tower. You can see that we heat right on up to our top temp of 3.3 K, and that is producing just shy of 85 millibuckets per tick of brine. So that is pretty huge, and it does give you something to do with a lot of that energy that you're making out of your reactor. Because these things, they take a little bit of energy to get up this high. Once you do, you now no longer have to have the whole thing with the solar towers, which is pretty nice. Now that we've finished with the basics of heat generation, let's talk about the Formulaic Assemblicator. This is basically your new auto crafting block. And the nice thing about it is that even if you just set it down, it's not powered, there's no power block behind it, nothing. You can use it as kind of an advanced crafting table. You can put stuff in here, and let's say we wanted to make, I don't know, a crafting table. Tells me that that recipe is okay. I say, I want to craft one of those. Boom. I got a crafting table. But you notice that it just cleans it out, and it's basically a kind of more complex, possibly slower crafting table. If we take a crafting formula and pop it in there, what we can do is take that same recipe, and I can encode it. Once it's encoded, I can now start crafting multiple because it just keeps pulling in based on this formula. Now, the other thing I can do is say, let's say I want to use everything that I've got. I can just hit craft available items. Takes all the items that I can use in here and turn it into what I want to make. That's pretty nice. Unfortunately, without any power, if I turn on auto mode like this, nothing happens. In order to use auto mode, we're going to take our show on over to this powered one. And again, the formula actually stays with the items, so you can move them around and you can keep different items if you want. Just put some wood in here. And if I click her on auto, it'll just start pumping away. And then you've got your automated crafting table. And just like other Mekanism machines, you can put in speed upgrades and energy upgrades into it. And it'll get faster and more efficient. Alright, now we've got something that is really exciting, and that's the Quantum Entagleporter. Now the Quantum Entagleporter is basically your tesseract for Mekanism version 9, or Mekanism in general as it were. And they work pretty straightforward. What you do is you go in here and you've got this kind of GUI that looks pretty similar to what you would see if you look at a teleporter, with the addition that you've also got side configs and transporter configs. And you can see you've got your public and private channels, and you set a channel pretty much like you would using the teleporter. And that is, you just type in what you want your channel to be. You could use a number, you could call it something. Let's just call this one stuff. And then you just hit your checkbox here, and you added this new channel, and it sets this Quantum Entagleporter to that channel. If we go over here, you can see that stuff carries over. You just click the set button, and now these two are both set to stuff. All right, now that we have our channel set, let's actually use one of these guys. If we go over to this gas tank here, and we just throw down a pressurized tube, see that the gas starts moving into the Entagleporter. but it doesn't really have anywhere to go yet, so it's mostly just filling up this pressurized tube. If we go over here and throw down another pressurized tube, you'll notice that nothing happens. And that's because, like all Mekanism machines, you have to configure the side. So if we go in here, grab our side config, grab the gases tag, and set our right side to output, you'll see that the gas goes through. And the other thing that's important to mention here is that on all of them, you need to set eject to on if you want stuff to actually come out on its own. Otherwise, you'll have to set it to extract or some other method, such as using another mod. Another neat feature of quantum Entagleporters is that they have an internal RF capacity. As you can see, both of these Entagleporters are set to 0 out of 400,000 RF. If we hook up a cable here and let some energy go in, you'll notice that that fills right on up. Now, I mentioned that this is kind of neat and cool, is that if we go into this Entagleporter and set it to, let's say, things, we click OK, you'll notice that it drops down to 0 out of 400,000 RF. And that's because this energy storage is actually based on the channel, not on the physical block. So the stuff channel actually has that capacity in it. So if we break this cable, we've got that 400,000 there. We set this back to stuff. That 400,000 shows right on back up. So yeah, there's a little bit of capacity here so that it'll kind of ride out any kind of dips that you have in energy by acting as a little bit of a capacitor in between the things that you're producing power from and the things that are actually consuming that power. That's actually pretty nice and a neat little feature. And other than these two things, you can set this up with liquid and items in pretty much exactly the same way that we did with the gas here. Now, before we start getting into the multi-blocks, it's important to note that there has been a change to the glass in Mekanism. Specifically, there used to be dynamic tank glass. That doesn't exist anymore. Now we just have what's called structural glass. And structural glass is now the kind of generic multi-block glass. It works in the dynamic tanks, just like dynamic glass used to. This is a, as you can see, dynamic tank that's filled with water. Structural glass right there on every single side in the center. Again, you cannot use it for your outside structure, but you can use it on the inside. And that's going to be true of the two new multi-blocks that we'll cover in a second here. So structural glass. The only thing that structural glass did not replace is the glass in your reactors. You still need special reactor glass for that. All right, now it's time for the multi-blocks. This is the first of the two new multi-blocks, and this is the Thermoelectric Boiler. Before we build one, let's take a look at what goes into a thermoelectric boiler so far as size and contents. Now, a thermoelectric boiler needs to be at least this size, which is to say 3 by 3 by 4. And inside there are actually two little blocks, and we'll get to those in a second. You also need a heat source. In this case, we've just got a creative energy cube next to a resistive heater, but you can also heat these using the wood fuel ones. And in fact, using the wood fuel ones, you can create a rather nice mid-game energy system, which I'll cover in a spotlight that's coming up next. As you'd probably expect, there needs to be a source of water. And basically what the whole boiler is doing is just taking that water and turning it into steam. And this is Ordic steam, so you can use it in other mods, as well as you can use it within Mekanism for anything that uses steam, which you'll see there's something over there. So what does it take to build one of these things? Well, you're going to need some pieces. You're going to need boiler casing, some of that structural glass that we just talked about. You're going to need a superheating element, which is the thing that boils the water. You're going to need a pressure disperser, which we'll talk about that in a second, what purpose that is. And you're going to need a boiler valve, and of course you're also going to need some mechanical pipe, something to heat it with, and something to act as fuel or to be an energy source for that heater. In order to build one of these things, as I said before, you need to have at least a 3 by 3 base. However, the size of your base can be up to anything that is 18 by 18 in size, and that includes anything that's rectangular. So if we just want to throw together let's say a 4 by 3, we can do that. The base should be all boiler casing. And then on top of this, you're going to need to place a couple of superheating elements. You need at least one, but in this case, we're just going to go ahead and put down 2. Now, at this point, you've created your water storage. And your water storage is going to be everything from this level up until when we place these pressure dispersers. As you can see here, the water has filled up just to the top of the heating element, and there doesn't appear to be anything where that pressure disperser is. In fact, what's in that top area there is the steam. And we'll see that in a second. So on top of this, what you can do is actually leave a space. So if we grab some of our structural glass here, just to do a little bit of building, what we can do is go up, let's say, an extra one like that, and put our pressure dispersers there. Now what this has done is it creates all of the space that's right here up to this block becomes water storage. And everything this block and above becomes steam storage. So if we build our corner up here, let's add, we want maybe one more for steam storage, like that. And then we just build it back across, and then we'll just finish this guy off. Alright, and with the last two blocks, we see that the red sparklings happen that let us know that we formed into a successful multi-block. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to do much with it like this because we're missing two things. And those two things are both boiler valves. There needs to be two boiler valves in this thing in order to get liquid in it and steam out. The first needs to be at the level of your water tank. And remember, your water tank is everything below the pressure dispersers. And then you're also going to need one at the level of your steam, which is again at and above your pressure dispersers. So now that we've got these on here, we can happily feed water in and extract steam out. Now the important thing to note here is that you don't need a valve specifically for heat. Whereas in the new thermoelectric evaporators, you need to have a port in order to get the heat in. These ones, you can get a heat into it just by either using one of the heat tubes, as you can see over here on this one. See that heat tube? It's just coming right out of that resistive heater into the corner block of the boiler casing right there through the thermodynamic conductor. No port necessary. But the other thing you can do, which is actually kind of handy, is if you just place the block, the heater block right next to it, and then throw down a power source next to it, you can see that if we set our config correctly, you can see that we're burning the energy here. Temps. Let's set our temp a little bit higher. Let's use 5,000 here. Temp goes up, but you'll also notice the temp is going up here. And that's because as long as this is physically touching your boiler casing, it's going to transfer the heat right out of this block and right into your boiler. So that'll save you a little bit of pipe sometime. And that's basically how you build the new boiler. It's pretty simple, and as I said, it's completely expandable all the way from the small 3x3x4 setup here to a full 18x18x18, which is the multi-block limit for Mekanism, and indeed I think that's the multi-block limit in general. Alright guys, this is it, the main event, the industrial turbine. I saved the best for last because this thing is really cool. Now, the industrial turbine is just like the boiler here, a multi-block that can go up to just under 18x18x18, which we'll talk about in a second. But this right here is as small as you can make it, which is 5x5x5. And it's quite the tiny looking little turbine. But if we jump up on here, you'll see that you can actually do quite well with it. If we knock this into position here, you'll see that it produces a whole bunch of power really quick using all of this. That was 5 full ultimate fluid tanks full of steam. And it happily drank all of it and dumped it into this cube up here. So it made quite a bit of energy very, very quickly. And this was just a little 2-prop turbine. So you can do some pretty amazing things with these turbines if you really put your mind to it, such as hooking one up to a reactor. Here's one that looks a little more impressive. As you can see, it's about, I think, 9 tall, it looks like it. It's again 5x5, but in this case we've put a lot more rotors. And in fact, this is as tall as you can make. Well, you can make them taller, but this is as usefully tall as you can make a 5x5. Any taller and you start running into wasted space. You might be able to put a few more of these top things, which are coils, in to make it a little bit more efficient, but this, by all practical purposes, is as tall as you'd probably want to make one. So what are you going to need to make yourself a turbine? Well, you're going to need actually a lot of stuff. You're going to need turbine casing. Now, notice that this is specific to turbines. You're going to need structural glass, which is the generic glass for Mekanism for its multi-blocks. You're going to need turbine rotors. You're going to need turbine blades. You're going to need a rotational complex. It's a very important piece right there. You're going to need pressure dispersers. These are the very same pressure dispersers that we used in the Thermoelectric Boiler. You're going to need some electromagnetic coil. That was that stuff that we saw at the top. You're going to need a turbine valve, or two. And you're going to need some turbine vents. So how does this thing go together? Well, the important part to know about turbines is that it has to be an odd numbered base. What does that mean? It means it needs to be an odd number by an odd number. Even numbers do not work. And the other important thing is that it must be at least 5 by 5. So let's start with a 5 by 5 boiler. All right, so you got your base set up here. Now what? Well, you need to build up your frame like any multi-block, but in the center of this 5 by 5 platform, we're going to need to put our turbine rotor. And we'll put up a couple of them here. Let's do 3. And onto this turbine rotor, you're going to place your turbine blades. Now, it doesn't matter which one you click on. Let's click on this top one here. It'll start building them from the base up. So if we add another, add another, add another, you get 2 per rotor. So for 3 rotors, we needed 6 blades. Now, the important part about forming the multi-block here is to notice that I said that this was as tall as this one can make it. As soon as you get high enough that the blades are going to actually hit the glass or hit any bit of the inside of this multi-block structure, it actually will fail to form. So as you make it taller and taller and taller, you need to make the base wider and wider to account for the fact that your blades are getting longer the higher up you make it. On top of this stack of turbine rotors, you need to place the rotational complex. This is what's going to take that torque energy into something that you can utilize. And on the same level, you also need to put these pressure dispersers. And you need to put them all around so that they will form a seal with the structure as you build it up. So let's go ahead and build up the rest of our structure right now to kind of show you what that's going to look like. Alright, so now we've got the basic outline of our turbine put together. And as you can see, once we put the glass in place, this is going to create a seal around the top of the turbine. Now on top of this, we need to start placing electromagnetic coil. The only block that really matters is that one there, but as you add more electromagnetic coil, it's going to create more and more potential energy creation. So with only one block, you're only going to be able to create so much energy. But as you add more blocks to your coil, it's going to get more and more energy production. And you can actually build this up if you want to. But in this case, we're just going to leave it blank just to kind of show you that you don't need to put anything on top. And at this point, we're just ready to finish it off. We are going to need a couple of turbine valves. We're going to need to put one down here for the steam to come in. And then we're going to need to place one, let's say, up here for the energy to come out. And at this point, let's just fill this all in with glass. Alright, now we're ready for our last little bit, which is the turbine vent. Now, you'll notice that I didn't actually finish this thing off despite saying that I would. And the reason is because you're going to need turbine vents on the outside as part of your frame. And the reason you need these is, let's step back here. The reason you need these is because you got steam coming in here. Your steam is going into a chamber here, which ostensibly is flowing up through these pressure dispersers and spinning these blades. But once they get up into this area, this top empty chamber here, that steam has nowhere to go. These turbine vents are giving a place for that steam to escape just out into the atmosphere. That way you create a pressure differential that allows the steam to flow out of this thing and turn the blades. And the other thing to notice here is that I left a little spot on top. You can place these in anywhere that's at or above the coil. So if we place that in there, we have our multi-block form. We can just right-click this thing, and our industrial turbine is complete. Now, there's certainly a lot more going on here to the industrial turbines, but at this point, I think you guys have enough information to start playing with everything that's new in Mekanism. And I really suggest that you get into the turbines, make yourself a turbine, make yourself a boiler, and just play with these things. I'm not going to go over the specifics yet because I don't know all the specifics yet. I have just started playing with these myself. I know how to build them, I know how to run one, but I don't know the numbers and I don't know how to take it much further than that. And I think really that's part of the joy of learning new stuff in a mod is getting in there and just getting your hands dirty and learning the stuff. And I really think that you'll enjoy yourself playing with these new turbines, playing with the boilers, playing with the new heat system, and just everything else. It's such good additions to the Mekanism, and I think you'll enjoy it. But that's pretty much it for my spotlight. I want to thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you in the next one, hopefully very soon. Later, guys!